Hello and welcome back! I'm Revonworc, and this is yet another half-assed last-minute creepy month special. And this time, I'm proud to announce I won't be talking about politics. Much. Now, I wanted to get back to basics and talk about a creepypasta. Now, since I started making these videos, I'd wanted to make a video about my all-time favorite creepypasta, Psychosis. I'm not doing that this time, so I don't know why I'm bringing that up, but I did read through another of my personal favorites this year, Humper-Monkey Ghost Story. Fundamentally, I like these two stories for ostensibly the same reason. They tell you their story from a first-person perspective, from a person who ultimately isn't sure whether the events they're experiencing are actually supernatural or not. That ambiguity makes for what, in my opinion, is a very good read. Both also make great use of building tension, which, let's be honest, makes for better horror. Now, warning, spoilers ahead. This story can be found in its entirety on the internet. If you want to read it first. Though be forewarned, it's very long for a creepypasta. Also, heads up, the story uses a ton of military abbreviations and terminology, so be prepared to read with Wikipedia open in another tab. Anyways, what is this story exactly? Well, it takes place in the 80s on a mountain in the German state of Hesse, described as being in the middle of the Fulda Gap, so probably in the Vogelsberg Mountains. The titular character, one Private Monkey, is a new recruit to the U.S. Army, having been arrested for assault and given the option between military and prison service. He's assigned to the 219th Special Weapons, a recently reactivated unit manning the Fulda Gap, a strategically important pair of passes between the inner German border and the city of Frankfurt. Essentially, they were there for what the story frequently calls Cold War bullshit. Anyways, Monkey arrives at their mountain base in November. The first line of the story is, "I stepped off the bus into 3 fucking feet of snow." First thing he does is get acquainted with the other soldiers, at which point he begins to learn what a fucking shit show this unit is. There's only 18 people, himself included. It's freezing cold outside, the barracks is incredibly poorly insulated. No one sleeps in their room because the only room with any kind of heat is the day room, aka the entrance area. This is due not only to the poor insulation, but also the fact that no one refuels the furnace. And the reason for that is that the barracks is haunted. See, this place was built in the 30s, abandoned and forgotten about in the 40s, rediscovered in the 60s, and only now, in the 80s, being put to use again. And it was originally built by the Nazis as an SS training facility where recruits practiced torture methods. Now, the place is fucking terrifying. Noises periodically screech through the barracks. Screams tunnel through the halls. Stomping and crashing can be heard from the unremodeled upper floors. Knocks can be heard from empty rooms, and the furnace room is the worst. See, when Monkey goes to refuel the furnace, he discovers why no one goes in there. It's unlit, and flashlights dim within it. It's massive, has a floor covered with black dirt, and the sounds of laughing and heavy breathing can be heard throughout the room, always seeming to come from right behind your back. The sounds of footsteps mysteriously go on an extra step or two after you stop moving. Now, Monkey is absolutely terrified, but he still crosses the room to reach the furnace, a giant black coal furnace with a swastika on it, of course. And he starts the fucker back up, and swiftly bolts for the door, locking the door behind him. But he still tries to rationalize everything. The chuckling, he conjectures, is the sound of the furnace burning. The breathing must be the water heater, which was also in the same room. The footsteps? Echoes. The room was massive, after all. Ostensibly, this is the core of the story. Monkey stays in this supposedly haunted barracks, experiencing all manner of disturbing occurrences and trying to work through his intuitive sense that something paranormal is happening, and his efforts to prove that ghosts aren't real by rationalizing it all. And he does a pretty good job of that, too. He starts taking notes of the noises, their timing, the weather conditions present when they happen, and he discovers a number of patterns. The noises occur every 15 seconds when the wind is blowing this direction, indicating that it's caused by the wind. The knocking sound is coming from the radiator because you can feel it vibrate when the knock happens, indicating it's an issue with the pipes. Stuff like that. There is one exception, though. When Monkey came to his CO with all the evidence he'd gathered, he had to admit he had no explanation for what happened to Tandy. In the 8th chapter of the story, one of the other soldiers, Private First Class Tandy, vanishes without a trace. He went into the bathroom connected to the day room, and after a while the rest of the unit realized he wasn't in the day room with them. When they went into the bathroom, they found his towel and shaving kit abandoned, but he was nowhere to be found. And that bathroom had no windows or vents, and the only door opened into the day room, which, remember, is constantly filled with people because it's the only warm room. They never did really figure out what happened to Tandy, and sure as shit can never explain it. But they did eventually find his body. Now, rereading this story for this video has been the 3rd time I've read it. First time was way back when I was still a kid. Back then they'd either not added the epilogue part of the story or I'd just been too dumb to notice it. I guess I could check the article history on the Creepypasta wiki, which is of course where I read it, but not important. In any case, I didn't read that part until the 2nd time I read the story, years later. It's in this epilogue they expand upon Tandy's disappearance. See, in the summer thaw, they start finding the bodies of people who went missing that winter. There were others besides Tandy. Tandy was just the only unexplained one. Their first CO just walked outside in a blizzard, and they found his corpse 250 feet from the front door. Tandy's corpse, however, was found much later, in a spot that Monkey had already been before and confirmed there was no corpse there. Moved there by snowmelt from somewhere else was the explanation. And when they found Tandy, he had this huge, creepy, ear-to-ear grin on his face. But periodically, other soldiers report, for lack of a better term, Tandy sightings. The epilogue is full of stories from other soldiers stationed at the barracks, most of which feature more explicitly paranormal occurrences, but which are also mostly told secondhand, with Monkey specifying he wasn't there for most of them, which, to me, implies there may be some degree of unreliable narrators somewhere along the telephone game that bring those stories to us. And the ones he was there for, he still doesn't buy into the ghost stuff completely, though he is less skeptical than during the main story. When a guy with a massive grin who looks like Tandy tries to break into the barracks, Monkey reports it as a guy in a mask, for instance. And honestly, maybe it was. And they never catch the guy, they just lock up the building and wait for the assault to stop. Okay, so, thesis statement. Ultimately, I could spend a long time talking about this story. It's very long, and I cut quite a bit of important story bits out, including the climax. So I'll wrap it up by saying why I like this story so much, and it's the ambiguity. The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. The story builds tension by hinting at something scary going bump in the dark, without ever showing it directly or even really confirming there is something there. And, oh, I just love that. Anyways, that'll have to be about it for tonight. One last thing, Humper-Monkey's Ghost Story has a series of sequels called 50-Foot Ant Stories, and I haven't read them yet, so maybe I'll cover those next year. Maybe I'll finally cover Psychosis and the Asylum series. Also, one last thing, I know I just said that, but rereading the story, I discovered this comment on the wiki article and just wanted to clown on it briefly. First of all, the "this story wasn't scary at all" comment is so typical of comments on the creepypasta wiki that I can't not think of the people who make them as idiots. Like horror is so subjective that not everything's gonna hit everyone in the same way, and there's value to horror stories beyond how scary they are, but more importantly, this was obviously made by a child trying to sound brave. But the real standout part of this comment is where the commenter is defending the Nazis? What the fuck? Okay, first of all, they say the Wehrmacht didn't all know about the Holocaust, but that the SS did. A couple things here. Firstly, the Holocaust isn't the only bad thing the Nazis did. I mean, even ignoring, the fucking war, everyone living under them knew it was a far-right totalitarian police state and ethno-state that openly engaged in political purges and wantonly annexed neighboring countries. But also, in the story, it was a fucking SS barracks, not a Wehrmacht barracks. And what's this nonsense about just assuming it's Nazis doing everything? It's like this person doesn't understand the story at all, which, I mean, they do admit to that. Once again, obviously a literal child's take. But, anyways, that was yet another last-minute Creepy Month special. Until next time, I'm Revonworc. This has been great, and I will see you all next year.